The context. Sinder is an indie American VTuber who debuted on June 25th, 2022, and was one of the top indie VTubers on Twitch, peaking at around 350,000 followers. She would get involved in a massive controversy on April 26th, 2025, when Nanolys, the artist for Sinder's models, posted a 17-page doc going over her experiences with Sinder and her manager Redacted. Following this document, several others would publish their own statements against Sinder, claiming that she was a massive manipulator who used everyone for the sake of her own growth. Sinder would fire Redacted the next day, and would post her apology statement following that. Sinder remained offline since the incident. However, on October 7th, 2025, Sinder would post a massive 1,000-page Google Doc on Twitter, stating that the individuals who accused her back in April were all lying. The overview. Sinder's document is divided into 13 separate sections, with the majority of the document focusing on addressing Nanolys, which is 21.2% of the doc, Silverveil, about 24% of the doc, and the overall breakdown of the events from Sinder's point of view, about 23.6% of the doc. In the document, Sinder would state that the purpose of the document is to defend herself and Redacted, take accountability for several things both revealed in the original documents and not publicly known information, and refute misconceptions that came out of the documents. Sinder would state that the document has speculative information that is mostly supported with evidence, and would call out the individuals who harassed anyone involved in the situation. The accusations. Sinder would explicitly call out 3 individuals for being the main perpetrators of the controversy. Nanolys for allegedly spreading significant slander and misinformation regarding her experience with Redacted, Shy Lily for allegedly, quote, orchestrating things behind the scenes and public manipulation, and Silverveil for allegedly lying about all of their interactions with Sinder. She would state that out of everyone involved in this situation, those 3 had the most to gain from Sinder's cancellation. Sinder would say that, because of the extreme harassment and character assassination of her and GamerSupps, a company where Sinder had partial ownership, she voluntarily stepped down from her position in the company. The arguments. Sinder would start her arguments by discussing her status with Redacted, stating that the two of them co-wrote the document. She would explicitly say that the two of them are still together after spending time apart, mentioning that, while she cheated on Red online and painted Red in a negative light in her first apology doc, where she would claim that she was blindsided by her friends and essentially forced her to publicly call Red out, the two are able to make amends after their time apart, and are actively together again, claiming that the two have had communication problems for a while that have improved over time, and moved past the problems the two had in the past. She would mention how she lived with Red and his family from summer of 2022 to the end of February of 2025, but moved out after having consistent streaming issues involving her setup. She would also state that Red would continue to work with Sinder as her manager, though would no longer handle work-related communications on her behalf, and would plan to delete the original tweet where she announced that Red was fired. She would also list a few things that Red allegedly hid from Sinder, which primarily consisted of communications with the 3 main perpetrators, Bao, Cotton, and other anonymous individuals. Sinder would move on to discuss the contents of her apology doc, primarily focusing on correcting statements made towards Red and her friends in that doc, reaffirming statements that the two took accountability for, and apologizing to several individuals who don't have their own section in the document. When it came to discussing Red and the statements she made against him, she divided the claims made in the apology doc into 4 separate sections: truthful actions that Red did alone that Sinder was already aware of, truthful actions that Red did that Sinder was also guilty of, truthful actions that Red did alone that Sinder wasn't aware of until writing the doc, and actions Red did that were false. She would also list 15 things that she took accountability for in her apology, which included cheating on Red, getting overly upset in multiple instances, and general negligence. Sinder would essentially call out the people who claimed that she took no accountability for her and Red's actions, and would state that while she does understand that Red's actions were ultimately her responsibility, she would claim that she was being blamed for things that she had nothing to do with. Outside of her apology, Sinder would list out 22 instances where she and Red are guilty of doing something wrong, and claim that these were the only wrongdoings that the two have done, stating that every other claim that was made against the two isn't true. Some of these instances include becoming neglectful of relationships, attempting to gain exclusivity of different things in multiple cases, being openly distrustful of various individuals, and several other things. She would state that the majority of these instances occurred between August of 2024 till April of 2025. Sinder would state how her relationships with her friends were damaged due to her priorities being focused on her work, and would apologize to them for neglecting them over the course of 2024. She would try to refute the claims that she was just using her friends for her own benefit by showcasing pictures of cosplay items that she created for some of her friends, and would state that her friendships were real and not stepping stones for her career. She would talk about how she and Red would dedicate an unhealthy amount of time towards her work, to the point where work was being done almost 24/7. Sinder would claim that the money wasn't their driving force for their work, but rather an indicator indicator of success, but did acknowledge an instance where the claims of her being, quote, money hungry would be the strongest, as the instance involved an intermission on one of her model debut lore videos that required viewers to donate bits in order for the intermission to end. However, she would state that the motivation behind this wasn't to garner monetary gains, but to implement interactivity into the debut. She would briefly go over a section in her apology regarding how she viewed her friends as competition, stating that Red was the driving force behind this narrative. Red would pitch in with his own mini-statement, where he would state that, quote, everyone was competition. While Red would state that the competitive mindset wasn't an excuse to hurt other creators, he would state that he did view Silvervale, Bao, and Shy Lily in a negative light, and saw them as, quote, direct competition in the negative sense. Sinder would go on to briefly apologize to 3 individuals in this section that didn't have enough to talk about in their own respective sections. With Tricky, Sinder would apologize to her for ditching her during a trip to Japan, where the two in Red were planning to go to the Godzilla store, but ended up going there without Tricky due to her being asleep. With Cottontail, she would apologize for avoiding her due to a situation that Sinder didn't have any involvement in. Red would throw in his own apology to Cottontail for asking Nano to not work with Cotton. With Nixu, aka Iomaya, Sinder would apologize to her for suddenly canceling an agreement between the two and failing to follow Nixu's terms of the agreement, where Sinder failed to verbally shout out her Patreon as part of the agreement. She would blame this on being unprofessional. Getting into one of the major sections of the document, Sinder would talk about Nanolys, the primary artist for Sinder, and her claims of manipulation, slandering others, and dragging her into drama. Sinder would claim that Nano's claims were the basis for everyone else to post their own statements, and said that after reading Red's DMs between him and Nano, Nano lied about her experiences. This section contains over 100 pages of DMs between Nano and Red, with the two occasionally providing context and additional information where Sinder and Red felt that it was needed. To try and get through the DMs, most of the screenshots in the beginning were general interactions between Nano and the two in their respective DMs, with the occasional updates and discussions for commissions, as well as the occasional praise for Nano's work. Red would pitch in from time to time talking about how Silvervale didn't like Sinder because she wasn't responding to Cinder's raids the way they wanted, as well as saying that Nano was always open to talking about drama. Screenshots of Red speculating about Silvervale's thoughts and behaviors towards Sinder were shown, with some even being emphasized. Red would claim that calling Silvervale the enemy of Sinder were Nano's words, and not theirs. More comments from Red would focus on emphasizing the positive relationship between Nano and the two, as well as trying to clarify some of the more questionable messages from Red that Nano used as evidence in her doc, such as claiming that Red never asked Nano to cancel anyone's models, though Red would later admit to offering Nano money to not work with Silver on a model. Red would compare Nano's models to, quote, rare trading cards, by saying how the more models Nano made, the less valuable they'd become for the people who have them, stating that each model becomes, quote, less special as Nano makes more. Sinder would pitch in as well when it came to her own DMs with Nano, stating that the infamous "it's just business" DM was used in a way as an attempt to reassure Nano that if she ever had to change the status of Cinder's commissions for whatever reason, it was just business and nothing personal. She would state that, without any of the context of Red's prior discussion, her DMs with Nano could be easily taken out of context. The two would talk with Nano about her wanting to cancel her commission with Bao, which would be a decent chunk of this section, where they would claim that Nano wanted to do this out of her own volition and was scared to do so, though Red would admit that he shouldn't have weighed in on his personal opinions regarding the situation. A series of interactions involving exclusivity discussions were also included, where the two claimed that Nano brought up exclusivity first through a hypothetical question. In a later interaction involving exclusivity, Red asked Nano to not take on any brand new model clients, and to not make any new models and outfits with Silvervale specifically. A deal was made, though it would be cancelled a month later due to her not being willing to cancel on Silvervale. Cinder would state that she had no part of this agreement, to which Red affirmed to be the case. When Nano was making a model for Shy Lily, Red would soon have issues with this, as he had concerns that Lily and Cinder had a negative relationship with each other. He would open up to Nano about this, claiming that he thought Lily really had issues with Cinder. This would be the last set of messages that Red had with Nano through DMs, and would also be around the time where Nano would stop talking with Cinder. Nano would soon add Red into a group chat with her and Nano's manager, Akira, where they told Red that Nano would be on an indefinite hiatus from working with them due to burnout. Red would accept this decision, but Red and Cinder would hint skepticism regarding the reasoning behind this decision. After some time passed, Nano would post her document to Twitter. Cinder claimed that the two attempted to reach out to Nano through DMs, but would soon delete them after. Nano would then cut off communication communication with them. When it came to Bao, Cinder apologized to her for neglecting her as a close friend, and for Red's general resentment towards Bao that ended up causing Cinder to feel similar resentment. Cinder would acknowledge that she knew of Bao's planned model with Nano and felt bad that Nano cancelled her model because of her. Red would also apologize for his resentment towards Bao and admitted to reassuring Nano that she could cancel Bao's model as a way to take an opportunity away from them. Cinder would include roughly 60 pages worth of screenshots containing various interactions of the three, though a lot of these screenshots would be interactions between Nano and Red, as a way for Cinder and Red to confirm the things that happened in Nano's section. Instances where Red developed negative opinions about Bao were included as well. Red would bring his opinions up to Cinder, where the two would fight over it. A unique interaction would be between Red and Sacramore, the music video editor for Cinder's music group Boss Rush, where Sacramore stated that he was going exclusive with Bao, where Red admitted that he was skeptical of Sac's reason for going exclusive, and began feeling resentment towards Bao, later claiming that Bao was very negative about her own music and was taking it out on her fans, but wouldn't provide screenshots to back those claims, instead linking a tweet that, quote, indirectly supports the above claim. Red would acknowledge that he misjudged Bao's intentions and situation, and apologized to Sac for being misinformed and hostile towards him. The majority of the remaining screenshots and comments were taken from Nano's section, though there is a portion where Cinder stated that Red pressured her to not interact with Bao professionally anymore, to where she said that she refused, but would choose to keep her distance with Bao. Red would admit to doing this. Cinder would also admit to neglecting their friendship, which caused Bao to feel isolated and confided in Numi about Cinder's actions. Numi's section primarily focused on Cinder apologizing for neglecting Numi's offer to be a part of her concert in February of 2025 by prioritizing her business venture of representing V-Card over Numi's concert. The roughly 6 or 17 pages of screenshots that followed contained several sets of interactions between Cinder and Red and Numi, as well as between Cinder and Shy Lily regarding their upcoming collab with V-Card. Generally speaking, the interactions with Numi consisted of Red and Cinder talking about the upcoming concert, where Cinder would be performing an original song composed by Numi, and the interactions with Shy Lily consisted of planning for the V-Card collab. Cinder would end up choosing to focus on the V-Card collab and her position as a part owner of Gamersubs, and would end up turning down Numi's request in a convoluted manner. This would lead to Numi confronting Cinder about it, to which Cinder apologized to her about the miscommunication. Numi would accept Cinder's apology. Cinder would be able to attend Numi's concert as a viewer, and told Numi that she would be at her next concerts, though it ended up not happening due to the controversy. Shy Lily's section focused on talking about her response to Cinder's apology. Cinder would state that Lily was the first person Nana reached out to about this controversy, and claimed that Lily orchestrated the collaborative effort of canceling her, with her response being the final nail in Cinder's coffin. The following roughly 12 to 13 pages of screenshots discussed Cinder's interactions with Shy Lily, specifically their V-Card collab, as well as previously mentioned information from the previous sections again. Regarding the V-Card collab, Cinder admitted that she leaked information about V-Card ahead of the release date, with some of that information being completely incorrect. Shy Lily would be openly annoyed about this happening, and stated in her stream that, while she won't say who leaked the information, official sources were the only ones that had the correct information about V-Card, with Cinder claiming that Shy Lily stated that Cinder wasn't an official source of information, despite her having the information and being a partial owner of Gamersubs. Cinder would apologize to Lily about the leaked information, to which Lily accepted at the time. The two wouldn't directly talk to each other for some time, until Cinder offered to play Split Fiction with Lily, to which she rejected. The last DMs between the two would involve troubleshooting OBS. Cinder would state that Shy Lily would never greet or thank her for 2 of the raids she did. From there, the majority of information was taken from Nano's section, though it would include an interaction between her and Boska about Shy Lily's lack of communication, to which Boska stated that Shy Lily only used Discord for business purposes. Cinder would send a message 5 days prior to the documents being published, to which she would get ghosted. The second largest section in Cinder's document talked about the individuals who were involved in canceling Cinder, which Cinder claimed to be 12 different people, though she suspected that more people had some form of involvement. Cinder would emphasize Shy Lily's involvement in this section, as she claimed that Shy Lily manipulated Nano into believing that Cinder and Red were manipulating her, leading to Nano's doc being made and published. It's in this section where the majority of comments made in the entire document were labeled as speculative. Cinder would provide a 17-day timeline that discussed the events that happened between April 11th and April 28th, 2025, where Sinder would source previous sections and VODs to provide a general overview of the events, while also providing speculative comments regarding the details, such as potential events that may have transpired, whether Nano's manager was actually her manager, and whether Nano's screenshots of DMs were taken in different time zones or not, though Sinder feels more confident in the last matter. Sinder continues this section by beginning her dissection of the documents with Nano's doc, already ripping into Nano's first sentence with 4 separate paragraphs. Generally speaking, Sinder is refuting Nano's claims of manipulation by allegedly pointing out instances where Nano either failed to provide the full context or made up information entirely. Most of the arguments in this portion of the section have previously been made in Nano's section of the doc, primarily focusing on Nano's desire to cancel other commissions and her desire to go exclusive with Sinder. Sinder would list out speculative theories regarding a few questions, but mostly speculated that Nano was manipulating screenshots after Nano sent them to others, Nano leaked messages to Shy Lily due to believing that Red was lying to her instead of Shy Lily, and Nano had Shy Lily write the document instead of writing it herself. Sinder would move on to talk about Bao's document, where the general claim of this section is that Bao, along with others, was misinformed about the events that transpired due to Nano and Shy Lily lying to them about the information. Generally speaking, Sinder stated that the majority of Bao's doc was full of false claims, in which Sinder claimed that Bao would only make these claims if she was told about the information by someone else. Sinder would use screenshots from Nano's section as her evidence, but would also reference Bao's stream on April 27th to assert claims and provide context. Her speculations would include Shy Lily contacting Bao to manipulate her, Bao's second model never getting cancelled, and Nano not wanting to work on Bao's model in the first place. Sinder's discussion about Shy Lily's response would be the most argumentative out of anyone else mentioned, as Sinder believed that Lily's response was what cancelled Sinder in the first place. Generally speaking, Sinder mostly focused on refuting claims of choosing business over friends for the sake of money and slandering others, though would make some choice words towards the end. Unlike the previous breakdowns, Sinder would only use around 7 unique screenshots as evidence for her claims against Lily's response tweet, choosing to emphasize her personal experience and thoughts. When it came to Shy Lily's response stream, Sinder would go into extensive detail, with this portion taking up the majority of the section alone. If we ignore the number of times she just says petty, which is 7, Sinder's main points were that Lily dodged collab opportunities and DMs out of her own volition rather than avoiding problematic situations, deflected problematic things that she allegedly did, as well as Sinder claiming that Lily admitted to, quote, everything she claimed was slander and manipulation that turned Nano against me in the first place. When it came to the speculations, Sinder would claim that Shy Lily did this out of envy and gained a lot out of lying. Lily encouraged Nano to lie in her doc, and Lily would manipulate Nano and others to push her narrative. She would make 3 different conclusions in this section. With the general conclusion, Sinder would state that while Red did create an assumed story based on his experiences that painted those involved in a negative light, the others could have done the exact same thing towards Sinder and Red. Sinder would state that she forgives her friends for partaking in her cancellation, as she believes that they were led on and manipulated. With Nano, Sinder would state that she felt betrayed by Nano's doc, and believed that Nano's intentions were originally malicious. Sinder believed that Shy Lily grossly manipulated Nano into speaking out, and planned to continue using Nano's work until they can be replaced. With Shy Lily, Sinder would direct the majority of her negativity towards her. She would be confident in Shy Lily being the overall mastermind behind Sinder's cancellation, and stated that nobody would have a reason not to believe Shy Lily, which she allegedly used to her advantage in deplatforming Sinder. Moving past that segment, Sinder would dive into the largest section of the document, Silvervale. Sinder would be upfront in saying that the two were never friends, and asserted that Silver hated her and Red for years. She would claim that Silvervale confidently lied about Sinder when she had the chance. Just like with the other sections, Silvervale's section mostly contained over 100 pages of screenshots, but did try to have a fair amount of original commentary and analysis. The main focus of this section was disproving the allegations of copying Silvervale's design and overall personality, by showcasing the history of Sinder creating her original concept based on her previous ASMR persona, and taking inspiration for other VTubers and their outfits. Sinder would talk about how the two met through a mutual friend, where the two somewhat hit it off, though wouldn't have future collabs due to Silvervale preferring to play alone. When it came to the meet and greet photo at TwitchCon in 2023, Sinder would state that the photo wasn't planned, and was taken by Red without her or Silvervale's knowledge. She would also include a series of attempted interactions with Silvervale through DMs, however, most would be met with silence. Sinder would also talk about how some of Silver's Twitch moderators reached out to Red and applied to be part of Sinder's moderation team. Although the main moderator in question asked Red to keep their DMs private, Red would put up the DMs up into the doc. It's through these DMs that Sinder would find out about Silver blacklisting Cinder's emotes in her chat, and eventually Cinder's name as well. When Sinder talked about Silver's statement, Sinder stated that Silver only knew what information Nano shared, and claimed that she only agreed with the narrative that the others decided upon by emphasizing Silver's apparent negative feelings towards Sinder. When Silver made additional statements on streams like the others, Sinder would use roughly 30 pages of this section to try and refute the statements made. Most of the rebuttals focused on Sinder claiming that Silver didn't tell her to go away when she felt annoyed towards her, and blamed Sinder for all of her failures. In her conclusion, Sinder would state that Silver is a quote master emotional manipulator and was envious of Cinder's success to the point of quote seething over her existence. Sinder would also speculate that Silver never liked her and copied her, not the other way around, and tried to call out Silver for collabing with Shy Lily, despite claiming to prefer streaming solo. Deputy Aru's section is on the smaller end of this document, as it primarily focused on two particular tweets from Aru that claimed that Sinder treated her as a tool to get to Silvervale rather than a friend. Cinder would claim that this wasn't the case, but rather it was Aru who offered an opportunity to meet Silvervale through a collab opportunity. Cinder would state that Aru admitted to lying in her tweets and included about 14 pages of DMs between the two, where it mostly consisted of the two talking about the potential collab, getting art together, and hanging out off stream. No speculative theories or breakdowns are presented in this section. When it came to Spite, Cinder apologized for the harassment Spite faced for being similar to her, and admitted to knowing about Spite being excluded from working with Nano because of Cinder's personal feelings. She would then claim that Spite was contacted by Shy Lily, who encouraged her to make a public statement that is quote, made up of allegations without evidence, and is purely based on conjecture. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but whatever. Similar to Silvervale's section, Cinder would begin with providing her evidence that she didn't copy Spite, and went into additional detail regarding the summer, goddess, and sleepwear outfits, as those were some of the main points Spite made in her document. While she states that most of their teasers and tweets were coincidental, Cinder does admit to making a tweet in spite of Spite after she believed that Spite was copying her. In her speculation portion, she would claim that Spite possibly copied Cinder, not the other way around, due to various circumstances. She would also talk about ASMR VTuber Nyantails and how individuals harassed her over similar designs, though wouldn't mention how she liked one of the individual's tweets, and would state that the two resolved their issues. She would conclude with a statement about VTuber designs and the general idea of copying others, stating that she grew to be less concerned with others taking inspiration from her design, specifically the fire inside her ears. After her breakdowns and decoding of the previously mentioned individuals, Cinder would issue a formal apology to her community, stating that she regretted disappearing with a poorly made statement and wished her community the best in the future. Red would also throw in a brief apology of his own. Cinder would also call out the individuals who harassed others for the sake of defending her, stating that they are disgusting people who don't belong in her community, and apologized to those who were impacted by the mentioned individuals. To conclude the doc, Cinder stated that she plans to come back as Cinder in the near future, and is excited to get back into content creation. The responses. Generally speaking, the responses have been very mixed, with a spectrum of positive and negative tweets being made commenting on Cinder's doc. The general pattern of responses are the following. Cinder is still to blame for everything. Cinder is more at fault, but others have some fault. Everyone involved has equal amounts of fault. Others are more at fault, but Cinder has some fault. And Cinder is 100% forgiven. In terms of direct replies on Cinder's tweet, the responses fall towards the negative side of the spectrum, with many stating that Cinder shouldn't have written 1,000 pages as a defense, Cinder contradicting herself on multiple occasions, and that, while Nano may have lied and over-exaggerated details in her document, there is still a decent chunk of padding, contradictory statements, and misinformation that goes beyond her counter-arguments against Nano. Outside of Cinder's tweet, the responses are more mixed, but generally fall in the moderate sides and the middle of the spectrum, though there are still plenty of people who fall on the ends of both sides. Focusing on the blue section, some of the main arguments made include that most people have a predetermined bias that they don't want to change, and anyone who didn't read the majority of the document made their opinions too early. Regardless of where you fall on this spectrum, do not harass anybody involved in this situation.